You're live. All right, college football week 3 is upon us. Welcome in to the college football kickoff show powered by WagerTalk.com. Game tonight, game tomorrow, just two. And it's kind of weird, the scheduling here. Just two top 25 teams in action this week. We'll talk about both of them here today as we welcome in the Pen. Ralph Michaels in the house, as is Drew Martin, ready to roll, and Mr. Rob Veno on East Coast time. Always a pleasure to see you gentlemen here. We're going to dive in because it is a little weird, the schedule. Ralph, let me start with you here quick because I noticed I counted 9 rivalry games in September. But that's kind of where this is the new college football, right? I'm not used to seeing Washington, the Apple Cup. I'm not used to seeing the backyard brawl, and here we are in September, and we got all of these big rivalry games staring us in the face here in week 3 of the college football season. That's just the new reality because they're all non-conference games now.
Yeah, I'm a fan. I'm glad the Apple Cup. Bowen just sponsored the Apple Cup for 5 more years. It's exciting to see the Civil War, Oregon and Oregon State. So, all you got to do is take the Pac-12 and set it down to 2 teams and make those all non-conference games played in September. It does add to the strength of the schedule. And again, those in-state rivalries, I am excited that they are continuing.
Yeah, I'm glad they are too. It's just a little weird because we all know, Rob Veno, teams that what they are in September is usually not what we get them in those rivalry games come November. So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. But we got an interesting one here tonight because Arizona State taking on Texas State. And, boy, doesn't it feel like Texas State is everyone's new darling, right? And I guess it makes a lot of sense, right? Jordan McLeod, former JMU quarterback. I think this is his 4th or 5th school in 5 years. Runs the kind of offense he loves being a part of. I mean, Arizona State's only won both their games on national television. I don't know what the hell else more they can do, but nobody seems to be betting them. Everyone seems to be betting Texas State tonight. Break this game down for us.
Yeah, Joe, it is interesting, right? Texas State gets themselves a national spotlight game. Money's gone their way. As somebody who's generally involved in Texas State's games from a totals perspective, I get to see a lot of them. I'll say this. Last week they played UTSA. They blew them out. But I don't think I'm going to be fooled all that much by their dominant play across the defensive front last week. UTSA's in a downward spiral. It's kind of reminiscent to how UTSA started last year without Frankie Harris at quarterback. They did not fare well early. The Sun Devils, they pick up 457 total yards per game. Kenny Dillingham, obviously one of those young, genius offensive play callers. The play calling has so far heavily favored the run, mainly because they're in a blowout against Wyoming, and they were way ahead last week. But how about 71.6% run, 28.4% pass? That's 106 rush attempts, only 42 passing attempts for Arizona State. So they'll try and run it against Texas State tonight. I mean, ASU's ability to play Wyoming and Mississippi State generally indicates that they should have success here against Texas State. I think that, the fact that he's put Sam Levitt into the ground game here, Dillingham, makes it tough to defend these guys. And Texas State will probably find that out. Cam Scatterbo has been great at running back. So ASU, to me, Joe, they're going to do their damage offensively. But Texas State, meanwhile, has become an offensive machine. You mentioned Jordan McLeod on top of JMU. He played at USF. Another dual threat guy. This is going to be the most explosive offense that Arizona State has seen right now. I'll say this, for people who love to draft, when you watch Texas State, they got a backfield of Isaiah Motti and Lincoln Parry. Those guys are tremendous. And they're going to get known by the nation here tonight in this game. Their defensive statistics look really good after 2 weeks. But again, when you face Evan Svoboda, the quarterback for Wyoming, that guy was a disaster. And then you play Mississippi State in just their second game, learning Jeff Levy's system. It's different than playing this team that's cohesive. It's revealed kind of in this fact, guys. The Bobcats have 27 plays so far this year of 10 or more yards this season. 2 games, 27 plays of 10 or more, 14 rush, 13 pass indicates the balance. Offenses are probably the best units on the field. Now, I'm going to close with this real quick because this morning brought us some new news. Pac-12 brings in some teams. Pac-12 is going to bring in more teams. The first 2 are easy to guess. New Mexico and UNLV are probably headed for the Pac-12. Albuquerque audience, Las Vegas audience, both basketball programs, easy. But I don't think they want to go geographically all the way across the country the way the Big Ten did, the way the ACC did. So they've tried to get Texas and Oklahoma before. So let's just stick to the state of Texas with teams that can possibly help the Pac-12. UTSA, San Antonio audience, 1.4 million. Probably they're going to get some consideration. North Texas, they're in that Dallas-Fort Worth triangle. They're going to get some consideration. And then there's Texas State. Texas State and San Marcos, kind of central between Austin and San Antonio. And they might be the best football program, non-Power 4 in the state of Texas right now. G.J. Kinney's had this motto since he got here last year, take over Texas. So you're probably going to get a really, really good effort out of them. I don't know if the money saw this coming and figured this is a motivational game for Texas State that early in the week. It was only announced this morning. But I can understand the line movement or people taking their shot with them here and now. I do think the game gets over the total, though, Joe. Early in the week it was 58.5. Now I think we're staring at 60, but it should be an offensive showcase.
Yeah, 59.5. I'm seeing it in there, and some great comments in the chat rooms here. Including over on TikTok, where the comment was made that, listen, when the Pac-12 is getting points from the Sun Belt, we got an issue here, people. And pretty much, I can't argue with that. I think we've got an issue here. But how much more can the running back of Arizona State do? I mean, my goodness. What's it going to be like by game 6 if they keep using him the way they've been using him here? Vino, they're going to run this poor kid right into the ground. But you got to love a Thursday night game. That's exactly what we've got. Arizona State and Texas State here tonight. Shout out to those of you guys joining us live on the College Football Kickoff Show. You got a game in particular you're interested in that you want to ask these guys about? Drop them in the comments, and we will get to them as we welcome in Drew Martin. Drew Martin bets tomorrow night. Drew, also pretty exciting stuff. It's one of those games where we actually, I believe, we know a few people together here that are certainly going to be on one side of this game with Kansas State taking on Arizona. I don't know how much you're a believer in K-State this year. I thought that game last week was interesting, to say the least, against Tulane. But Arizona still feels like, new coach and all, but still feels like they can put up points with the best of them. So what do we get in this game tomorrow night with Arizona and Kansas State?
Sure, Joe. Yeah, fun one. Friday Night Lights here, prime time, nationally televised game in the Big 12 Conference. However, a unique matchup. We've seen it a couple times in our lifetime in terms of two teams in the same conference not playing a conference game. They already had this scheduled, so this will not count towards the Big 12 Conference standings anyway. However, it's going to go a long way for both of these two teams, in my opinion here, Joe. What we're getting 59.5, 60 as the total, in Kansas State -7. Do note, WagerTalk Live odds screen, a key global book, just went to 7 and a hook. And I think that's kind of a leading indicator here, Joe. You mentioned Arizona, offensively, they got the firepower with Fafifa, star wide receiver McMillan, who, oh, by the way, were a combo in high school as well. But I look at this more from a spot, Joe. You mentioned Kansas State not looking good last week. A lot of people watching that game against Tulane needing a scoop and score in the fourth quarter to kind of beat the Green Wave. But this is a short week, Arizona's first road game under Brent Brennan. I don't like that kind of schedule spot for the Wildcats. Plus, I think Kansas State has a better defensive front, kind of sacks-wise. I think they get after it. So top 20 matchup, Kansas State 6-1 straight up and against the spread last year at home. I think all of that kind of works here. Kansas State, get that 7, guys. I think they win and cover. Not a best bet by any means, Joe, but a fun one on Friday night. I would look towards Kansas State in this matchup.
Yeah, it should be a very fun one there. We should also, those that like Kansas State or might be an alumni, I would not want to be stuck on a plane next to them as they lose that game. Would not want to hear the screaming and yelling coming from the front of the airplane if K-State is not able to pull that one together here as we welcome in the pen. Ralph Michaels in the house here. And Ralph, we're going to head into the weekend here before we break down, of course, a couple of games that have big interest, a couple of top 25 teams that have big interest coming up. But this line has been baffling to me all week, Ralph, so maybe you can help me understand how in the hell you can go to Camp Randall and be laying almost, over 2 touchdowns. I don't care who you are. That's a rough ask. I don't care if it's Alabama or who it is, but the market seems to think that Bama is going to go there and have no problem running over Wisconsin. Are you on that page as well?
I am, Joe, as are my clients. This is an actual client release for me on Alabama. So I did lay the 16. If you take advantage of my college football package this weekend, including my 5%, this is a play that you will get. And simply to me, this is really an eye test game. I look at this Wisconsin squad, and yes, it's easy to say, oh my God, you got a defensive home dog. They're 2-0 straight up. But they've only averaged 27.5 points. And you look at the 28 points against Western Michigan. That seemed okay until we saw what Western Michigan did against Ohio State. The 27 points against South Dakota, not impressed. Guys, that is South Dakota, not South Dakota State that won the national championship last year. So they were a favorite of 24.5 and 17.5 points, but yet they're 0-2 against the spread. Why? Well, you rushed for 4.2 yards per carry at home against Western Michigan and South Dakota. Your quarterback, who, Joe, you're familiar with from being down in South Florida, Van Dyke, 60% completions. And how about this? Only 6.4 yards per attempt. That is an ugly number. We look at Alabama, Milroe, 2 games, an 11.1 yards per attempt. We look at Bama, 63-0 over Western Kentucky. They did exactly what they needed to with a 600 to 145-yard edge. And you can look at last week's game and say, oh, wow, they really did struggle. It was a close game in the third quarter. They were -3 turnovers. Rarely is a team going to win by 26 points if you are -3 turnovers at the end of the day, but I think they do. And when you look at last week's games, Joe, it's a very misleading stat. Look at Wisconsin. They only allowed 13 first downs and 237 yards. Alabama allowed 21 first downs and 309 yards. But why is Bama's defensive performance better than Wisconsin? Well, Wisconsin against South Dakota only ran 51 plays. That means Wisconsin actually gave up 4.65 yards per play. USF ran 82 plays, so Bama only allowed 3.8 yards per play. So one of those misleading box scores that you look at gives us value. And lastly, Alabama does have Georgia on deck, but they have a bye next week. When I went to the database and looked at AP top 10 teams that have a game against another AP top 10 foe on deck, but they have a bye the week prior, listen to this. Since 2008, those teams with a bye and a top 10 team on deck have gone 95 and 45 against the spread. That is 68%. When they've been an away favorite of 7 or more, that goes up to 83% against the spread. They know they have Georgia. They know they've been fairly vanilla. This is the game they open up their offense. They leave nothing on the table. And with a bye on deck, it is starters on board to make sure they have positive momentum going into the Georgia game. Bama, -16, a client release from Ralph Michaels, WT.buzz/RM.
All right, let me ask you here, Ralph. I'm going to do my Teddy Covers impersonation. You ready for this, Drew? By the way, Drew Martin already texted me. Van Dyke, total bum. All right, you heard it here first. Total bum. Got no use for him now that he left the U of M there. Ralph, are you just a little bit concerned about the inability of the Crimson Tide to run the ball? They were getting crushed at the line of scrimmage by South Florida. I mean, they weren't getting any separation in the running game. They were getting hit nearly at the line of scrimmage. I believe the number was 42% of their 38 rushes. They were getting hit head on. Where is the run blocking of Alabama? We don't see it yet. And isn't that a little concerning on the road?
It is. And, they gave up those 3 sacks against USF, which is something you're not comfortable seeing in Alabama. But, you look at last year, Milroe actually got sacked 49 times. That was once every 15.1% of his attempts. That is a number like we've never heard of in Alabama. But again, it was a different situation. And, you look at Bama, they were off that Western Kentucky easy win, and did they look past USF maybe while they're going on their first road trip? But again, Joe, it really is just an eye test play. I know USF looked good. They were prepping for Bama. And I know Fickle came out and said, oh, my God, we had this game circled. But if you're a head coach at Wisconsin and you have a Big Ten road opener on deck, I'm going to say Wisconsin has as much to prove by just getting through this game and getting to the USC game to make sure it wins. So, yes, a concern, but, I am not really that impressed with Wisconsin D that allowed South Dakota to rush for 4.4 yards per carry and 153 yards last week.
Yeah, and boy, I tell you, you brought in, Lungo from North Carolina there, Luke Fickle. It would be great if you actually had wide receivers, I don't know, that could gain any separation would be fantastic. But I digress. The bottom line is that's 3 games coming up here. I'll give you our thoughts on those. We've got 2 more games that we're going to go roundtable style for you guys here. And, of course, one of them being LSU, South Carolina. The other is going to be a top 25 matchup between Boston College and Mizzou. And we want to give you guys, whether you're joining us live here across the platforms or if you're watching on the replay, we appreciate you doing that. Drop those questions, comments, games that you're looking at, that you're interested in the comment section. We'll answer as many as we can. And, of course, we'll be in that chat room all week long here and the weekend long. So if you got any questions, drop them down below. I know we've got a couple. Titan CT coming in here looking at, don't even bring up Notre Dame to me. One of them is going to be the South Carolina question. I know I'm seeing that a lot over on TikTok as well as Instagram. So let's dive into LSU taking on South Carolina for Titan CT and others here. I did like them last week. Rob Veno against Kentucky turned out to be a pretty good situation there. They are at home against LSU. Felt like 7.5, I think. 7.5. Once again, is LSU overvalued? Are we not giving enough credit? Where do you go with a game like this that's such a key number right now?
Yeah, it's crazy, Joe, but this is where power ratings and eyes, power ratings to kind of separate what you're seeing with your eyes. And from my numbers, LSU rates as a 9.5-point favorite in this game. 7.5 looked big when I first looked at it, but then when I did the numbers, 9.5. So maybe it's in the ballpark. It's fair. And that's with downgrades to LSU through the first couple of weeks, right? I happen to think LSU is probably due for a breakout game here. A couple of reasons why. First of all, I've got no faith in South Carolina. Question mark next to them. They beat Old Dominion in their first game, 23-19, barely scraped by. What does Old Dominion do after that? They go out and get beat by East Carolina, score 14 points, 20-14. So jury certainly out on ODU and how maybe it was a worse victory than 23-19 looks for South Carolina, even though it was a first game. Last week, they go out and beat Kentucky 31-6, as misleading as it gets, right? South Carolina has 31 points and 13 first downs. Since when does that correlate? They don't. 252 yards and 31 points. That doesn't correlate. 79 rushing yards. And the QB here, Lenoris Sanders, from my perspective, the jury's still out on him. South Carolina scored 17 of their 31 points last week on drives of 2, 20, and 43 yards. That's not great. They played an inept Kentucky offense, and that Kentucky offense looked absolutely abysmal last week. So I don't know how much I can put into their defense, considering this will be a considerable step up in class playing LSU. I don't know that the offense for LSU is in question here, guys. What's in question is their defense. It is now the third game of the new system, and perhaps conference game, they could be a little bit better now, a little more cohesive, and they're not facing a world-beating offense. So to me, they can go on the road and outscore this team by 8 points. They can win this game probably just based on their offense and from what I've seen of South Carolina so far. The weather here could be somewhat of a concern. 40 to 60% chance of scattered storms through the entire second half. That could be a problem. But I think if it's a problem, it's more of a problem for South Carolina, a team that can't run the football at this point in time. LSU can run it a little bit. So give me LSU minus the 7.5.
Ooh,
Or
Brian,
7.
Or 7. Yeah. You could very well here. Drew, how about you in this game, SEC land here? Are you a believer in South Carolina, or do you think LSU is the right side?
This is a tough one, Joe. With the Gamecocks here, I mean, the 31-6 win last week over Kentucky, but, Rob just hit on some of it, taking advantage of kind of the short fields there. However, I am a handicapper. They were plus 34.5 points against the spread, meaning, they were catching near double digits and winning 31-6. It's something that you got to pay attention to. They are 7-3 their last 10 home conference games, so they're playing in Columbia. I guess I would take the other side of what Rob was saying in terms of the weather possibly affecting this game, guys. LSU struggled a bit running the football against Nicholls State, just 64 rush yards for a team that's supposed to have one of the better offensive lines in college football. That's a little bit head-scratching to me, and they do have the quarterback edge with Nutzmeyer there. But if weather's an issue, I actually think that it's gonna maybe kind of hamper their passing game a little bit. LSU is 5-1 against the spread in their first SEC game of the season. So right out the gate, they have been good, making money. It's just, if weather does play an issue, I think that LSU might have a little bit of issues kind of moving the football through the air. So it's a tough one for me. And we have seen one sportsbook offshore move to the 6 and a hook. Hey, talked about South Carolina at home being money makers. So I lean towards the dog, maybe the home dog barking here in Columbia, South Carolina, Joe.
Listen, crazier things have taken place there. Ralph, do you feel like, Ralph, this is going to be one of these high-scoring games, too, as well, where we're going to get a ton of points? Or do you think this is going to be maybe the most, whoever has the best defense is going to win this game?
Well, Joe, if you're going to ask who has the better defense and LSU's involved, it's 90% of the time the other team. So, that's
– good point.
LSU so – maybe FIU wouldn't be in that group where we could say LSU has a better defense than FIU, or, maybe Kent State. We'll see what happens. You look at what LSU did, and, a 44-21 win over Nicholls does not impress me. You talked about Alabama struggling. I only watched bits and pieces of that LSU game. But for them to run the ball 21 times and only gain 64 yards at home, coming off a national televised loss, excuse me, that's 3.0 yards per carry. So those numbers obviously incredibly ugly. Excuse me. But now South Carolina, how impressed can you be? The Old Dominion game I watched, and if they didn't have jerseys on, I would have said Old Dominion is the better team. When you're looking at the line of scrimmage, you're looking at the eye test. Against Kentucky, the complete opposite. Yeah, they only put up 252 yards, but again, they just dominated that game. defensively, they only finished with a 69-yard edge. So again, value-wise, I don't think there's value with either team. South Carolina, again, much more exposure off that win against Kentucky. LSU not looking past them. But where I'm going to find value in is this. Against, when you're playing LSU playing their first conference game and having to go on the road, there's a little bit of difference when you're calling plays. You don't throw the ball downfield as much. You try to establish the run against an SEC foe and take their crowd out of it. So to me, I am actually going to go under in the first half. Now, LSU can, expose themselves and throw the ball deep. But when I went to the database, there's a lot of times when teams are playing their first or second conference game that I think there's values on the under, because during the non-conference games, they're playing weak foes. They're not playing teams that they're familiar with and defenses that are ready for them. So I went back all the way to 2010. And when an SEC team is playing a conference game in the first 4 weeks of the season, you can blindly bet every of those conference games, and it's 57% to the under, 116 overs and 154 unders. I mean, that's almost 300 plays of sample size. So it does give you it does quantify it to a fair degree to let you know that those first conference games for the team on the road is, again, a team that I expect them to struggle early. So I don't like the full game under. I do like first half under. We know South Carolina is going to try to run the ball. They've ran the ball so far 90 times to only 39 passes this year. We know Nussmeier is going to try to pass, but I got to think if you're the OC and you threw 38 times and only 21 rushes against Nicholls State, you're going to want to at least try to establish the run. Under first half, South Carolina, LSU.
All right, looking for a little defensive battle early, looking at the under in that one there. And I do think ultimately as the season goes on, I think that LSU loss to USC, I think that will age well, because I don't think anybody gave USC enough credit for what they're going to be. So things are far from over for LSU, but this is a kind of game that they got to go in there and be able to handle business if we're going to take them seriously. Taking seriously is another game that we've got. We're going to break down for you, because I didn't see Boston College being top 25. I don't know about you three guys, but that is not something I had on my bingo card. And yes, we're only in week 3. Taking on Mizzou, who I believe we all thought was certainly top 5, top 10 this year. Let me start with you, Drew. The Mizzou Tigers taking on Boston College. You got to give BC credit. I didn't think they were going to be as tough as they are, but I don't know that this is a walk in the park for Mizzou. Do you?
No, not at all, Joe. Actually, I mean, out of the 3 games I kind of pinned with on the show, this is my best bet for the show here, Joe. And I'll break it down here. It's plus 16 on BC. There is a key global book. If you go to the WagerTalk live odds screen, putting the hook on that 16. I would go grab that, guys. I like the Eagles here, Joe. I really do. Couple reasons why. You look at their offensive line. There's 3 offensive linemen for BC projected to be drafted in the NFL draft, and you could see it in what they're doing offensively. First off, I mean, they're number 130 in college football in plays per minute. They're playing a very slow offense, which in today's college football, I don't think is a bad thing. If you can kind of be unique and different in what teams have to prepare for, which, in today's college football, a lot of offense is looking to go up tempo. So if you're slowing it down, you're running the football, you're getting a good push up front, that can be tough on your opposition because it shortens the game. You're not going to get a whole lot of possessions for that Missouri offense. Bill O'Brien, yeah, it's his first road game, or it's his second road game. In his first road game, he went into Tallahassee and knocked off FSU as a 16-point dog. Oh, well, he's a 16-point dog again. He's up against Missouri here. We just talked about LSU. The SEC has struggled a bit out the gate in some of these marquee matchups. I think this is another one, Joe. I like BC here. Drinkowitz, the head coach for Missouri, he's just 6-10 as a home favorite. And yes, Missouri hasn't let up a point yet this season, but we got to talk about who they're playing. Murray State and Buffalo, they're taking a big step up in class here, Joe. So I think the dog's barking here. Put the plus 16 and a hook in your pocket. I like BC to shorten the game, run the football, stay within the number. Hey, and take a big swing here. The dog might be barking, get a huge plus price on the money line. Best bet for the show, BC plus 16 and a hook against Missouri. Early start as well, Joe. You know, the fans don't have all that tailgate time to get very hydrated and loud. So I think the early start will help BC as well. Keep the running attack going. So, yeah, plus 16 and a hook on BC. Sprinkle a little bit on the big money line.
Yeah, I'm with you. It feels like a ton of points, Rob Veno, does it not? And not saying that Mizzou can't certainly cover it at home, but boy, that is a ton of points. We just saw Boston College go on the road in Tallahassee, did we not? And play pretty darn good defense. Defense travels. Do they have enough of it to keep this thing within the number?
Let's just get through the weather here quickly on this game as well, because it's projected to rain all game long. This is an 11:45 a.m. start. I think Drew mentioned it's an early start. But it's supposed to rain 30 to 60% chance all game long, so we'll see. So many point and counterpoints to this. Listening to Drew, it's almost every headline. I mean, I've got 2 pages of notes here on this game, and almost every headline he hit on. Listen, you can be really good running the football the way that Bill O'Brien's team is. I mean, they have a 39.09 to 20.51 time of possession edge against FSU, plus 18 minutes, 18 seconds worth of time of possession edge. That's one full quarter plus 3.5 minutes. So it's like saying, hey, FSU, why don't you show up with 12 left in the second and we'll start your game then. And the play calling, I won't count the Duquesne game, but the play calling in that one was 76.5% run, 23.5% pass. It's all well and good when you're close in the game, right? The key to beating Boston College is you got to get ahead of them and then make them get out of character. 14-0 Missouri right off the bat. Bill O'Brien won't panic, but come second half, he's not going to be able to grind out possessions and catch up 2 touchdowns. There's just no way. So I had to start looking at Missouri as opposed to Florida State. Drew mentioned BC's offensive line. Missouri has the same thing. 3 offensive linemen projected to go in the first 2 rounds of the draft. This is a road grader offensive line. FSU got beat up in the trenches by this Boston College team. But where FSU really got beat up was on the defensive line. And I see this week that a major newsletter is actually starting to spread the nickname of this defense. Missouri's calling themselves the death row defense right now. Obviously, when you give up nothing to Murray State and Buffalo, you can be a little cocky. But they don't have a quarterback anywhere near the skill level of Thomas Castellanos, right? What you want to do with Castellanos is you want to force him to the air. Because if they can run, they're a 3-headed monster at running back. They can run. Take away an option. I would say this game is really hard to project from a point spread angle because you have to guess which team is going to get out in front. If BC goes up 7-0 and this game is tied or within 7 all the way through 3 quarters, plus 16.5 is probably going to cash. But if Missouri, that wide receiver room is healthy this week. Luther Burden went out last game because he got ill in the first half. Theo Weiss had 13 catches for 169 yards, I think it was, before he got hurt with his shoulder, but he got cleared. This is a totally different offense than what they saw against Florida State with DJU screwing things up, missing receivers all over the field. Brady Cook doesn't miss receivers that way, generally speaking. So you've got a multi-dimensional offense that can strike from anywhere on the field. The potential of them getting up at home quickly in a game where they've actually benched starters at the end of the first half in the first game and didn't play them all the way through against Murray, and their backups played well. So it becomes really, really difficult. Again, you have to figure out which side of the fence you want to be on. Can O'Brien's team get to the scoreboard first? Can O'Brien's team keep it close? Because if they don't, Joe, you could legitimately see 35-13, 31-13, something in that vicinity that covers the number. Missouri's that explosive, and I think Missouri's that much better defensively than Florida State is. Question becomes, do you want to take the chance on the back door at 16.5? I don't know that I do. So for me, it's probably a pass, but I could see cases for both sides.
Yeah, I know Drew and a few other guys in the chat room think that congratulations, BC, showing up top 25 this week. They'll be gone by the time we have this show again next week. Ralph, what are you thinking we are going to get in this one? Because Rob brings up a really good point. You don't have a choice but to keep this game close and lower scoring. That would be fantastic. The weather is coming in. We know that throughout this part of the country over the weekend. But BC, their best choice to keep this thing close and within the 16 is it better be under 54 points, no?
Yeah, I was just writing Rob's notes down. Basically, he said, if Missouri wins by 17 or more, you want to bet the Tigers. If Boston College covers the, you want to bet the Eagles. So,
yes.
Rob,
great handicapping.
Well
Ralph.
done. Yes, good stuff. Listen, tell me where he was lying, Ralph. Tell me where he was lying. So, I thought he was spot on.
And you to be just as vague because my power ratings say to bet Missouri, and it's easy to say this. Boston College is not a top 25 team. They are not one of the best 25 teams in college football. They happen to be Florida State, and we see Florida State did not play very well. And then what did they do? They beat Duquesne 56-0. So, again, I think that actually hurts them, getting put in the top 25 after their upset and now having to travel for the second time in 3 weeks and playing in Missouri. Now, Drew, I will tell you this. You had made a statement, and I was going to the database while you were talking, Drew. You had talked about an early start time for the SEC. These are young kids having to get up. You're in the Central Time Zone, so the game's actually starting before 12 noon Eastern local time. And how about this, guys? When you are looking at teams early in the season and the SEC start time is before 1 o'clock local time, when they're playing a non-conference foe, since 2012, those games have gone over 63.4%. So, Drew, perhaps you are onto something there with the defense is not quite being ready, the fans not being as excited. So that is SEC teams at home, a non-conference game that starts before 1 o'clock local time, 63.4%. With that said, that is going completely against what my opinion is going to be. I didn't use Missouri, even though my power ratings have them as a 19-point favorite, just because what Rob said, if Boston College can run the ball, they have a solid offensive line. I mean, putting up 300 yards, 6.1 yards per carry against Duquesne doesn't impress me. But again, going on the road to Florida State, you're playing a conference foe in a season opener in week 0, and you can rush for 263, 5.1. That is what I like. I'm going to go under first half. We know Boston College is going to try to establish the run early. Fact. If they have to throw the ball, we'll see if he can do it. We know Missouri, again, talented wide receivers, but they're still going to try to run the ball early. Last week, they ran the ball 41 times against Buffalo and 42 attempts. So Missouri ran 83 plays last week. That's some tempo we're not accustomed to, and that's part of the reason I couldn't play this under as a client release. But one note from the database, only 32 times, guys, in the last 24 years has a team shut out back-to-back opponents like Missouri has. FYI, the next game, they're 10-22 against the spread. That is 31%. And if they're at home off back-to-back shutouts, they've only covered 27% of the time. I think BC is fake, but they're a quality fake team. They can run the ball. So again, if they get out to the early lead, I think they can cover. Now I'm sounding just like Rob. But I am going to give out my official opinion on this game. Under first half, both teams want to establish the run. The weather, I think, will be a factor. Give me under the total.
All right, so you're another under in the first half. And just to be clear here, Ralph, you're of the mindset that if Missouri covers the 17, they'll win this game, correct? Rather easily? Is that basically how you're going? Just want to make sure I'm on the same page.
I'm going to say that, but with my luck, the way the season has started, they'll be up nothing with 6 minutes to go, and the lightning strike will hit, and they'll empty out the stands and call the games.
Just want to make sure we're all on the same page here. That is all that matters here. All right, so we do have the beloved MOK on Instagram, by the way. Shout out to you. Those of you joining us on TikTok, we appreciate you stopping by. And, of course, those of you watching us live on YouTube, make sure you hit that like, subscribe button. But don't forget, even on the replay, drop any questions about games you got coming up this week, and we'll get to all of them before kickoff on Saturday. And I do want to ask a question. There's two questions that keep popping up, but let me start with the most obvious one. A lot of Irish fans in the chat room here. And the problem is the Irish are pretty good defensively. And Rob Veno, let me start with you. They suck offensively. They can't throw the ball. Hate to break the news to you, but maybe, just maybe, that quarterback that you transferred in there, maybe not as good as everyone thought he is. And now there's some concern that he's got a shoulder issue, his non-throwing shoulder. So now if he's not willing to run, Notre Dame's got bigger problems, Rob Veno, here than just losing to Northern Illinois. I mean, I hate to break it to Irish fans, but this is a problem moving forward.
Yeah, how about we stop going to the bottom tier of the ACC to find our starting quarterback? Sam Hartman last year, Riley Leonard this year, both are great in the ACC.
Thank you.
And they show up here at Notre Dame and run into whatever this offense is called. I really don't know what it is, but it's not much of one. I used to really rip Jimbo Fisher for prehistoric offense, but Notre Dame is the same type of team. I mean, just because they beat A&M didn't mean much. It was a battle of attrition. Notre Dame won it.
Yep.
Purdue has an offense here, so we'll see. I thought the points were probably a little bit high, but as far as their long-term projections, Joe, as far as the defense can carry them, right? As far as the defense can carry them, unless something gets going. At least last year they had Estime to run the football really well. And the prior year, I think Kyron Williams was in that backfield. They ran it fairly well. But these ACC quarterbacks aren't panning out for Notre Dame, that's for sure.
They're not any good. I mean, I hate to break it to, Drew, you and I don't think we're ever a big Notre Dame guy anyway, but I will always say this. Their defense is always legit. It's always going to be a top 10 defense in the country. But, man, because you want to be on the outside looking in, you better be able to score on some teams if you're going to win some games. I mean, what happens now? I don't trust them offensively. I'm willing to bet a ton of unders in Notre Dame games here, but did anything you see, even again, I don't even know how they beat A&M on the road. I really don't. But they ended up doing it. What do you think the ceiling is here for Notre Dame? Because I think they've got another bad loss coming at some point here in the season.
Well, yeah, I mean, Joe, it's tough to argue against that. I mean, going up against NIU and losing that was one of the biggest upsets I can remember in the last couple years. I mean, yeah, it was definitely head scratching. And then you go back the next week, and this is kind of modern day college football. A lot of unknowns out there. Beating Texas A&M, it looks good with all the talent that A&M's supposed to have, but even breaking down A&M's game this week against Auburn, how good is Texas A&M? We really don't know. How good is Auburn? So a lot of unknowns. I mean, Riley Leonard, the injury, this is one we got to watch and see here. If he goes down, I was actually a believer that he was a pretty good quarterback at Duke. So, and then on the other side of things, Purdue, they played an FCS team and then had a bye week. So really, they've had all summer to prepare for this game. I actually think that's kind of pointing here towards what we could grab doubles with Purdue at home. I mean, the Boilermakers are passed for me in this one, Joe.
I am with you 100% in that one as well here. I think it's far too many points for a team that can't score any points here. Ralph, we've got another monster. A few people asking about bad losses and bouncing back. And I don't know if your database was up and running, but obviously Notre Dame, bad loss, looking to bounce back here. But can Kentucky bounce back against Georgia? What do you think Kentucky's chances are here this week to even remotely stay? I thought Kentucky had one of the best defenses going into this season here. I thought the amount of guys they returned on that side of the ball, I thought they were going to be great. And then, the offense didn't do them any favors last week, and they end up losing big time. But what happens Kentucky at home against Georgia? Were they looking ahead, Ralph? What do you think?
You're playing South Carolina, your home opener. I don't think you're looking ahead. Joe, I'm going to just jump back 1 second to the last game that we talked about, because someone called and said to me, you know what, Ralph? I think Notre Dame's got a huge edge playing a third game against Purdue, only playing a second game and not having played any foes. So I did go to the database since 2007. If you are an away favorite playing your third game against an opponent playing their second game, like Cincinnati, Notre Dame, South Florida, Georgia, and Indiana this week, those teams as an away favorite are only 39% against the spread since 2007. So don't think having a third game to play with 2 games under your belt versus a team playing 1 game under your belt is actually an advantage. In this case, the rust has been better than, having the extra time to prepare for that team. As far as Kentucky concerned, Joe, this is just a game that I crossed off right away. And I'll just simply explain why. I was not impressed with their 31-0 win against Southern Miss with a 317 to 131 edge. Now, you can clearly say it doesn't matter. They shut out the opponent. They had an SEC opener on deck. They looked past that foe. But then when you played South Carolina and you were 6 of 17 for 44 yards passing at home, and now you're facing Georgia, there is no way I can back Kentucky. But when I go back and look at all the work I did with the summer with the power ratings, Kentucky would actually be a release for me. So that's the case where until my eyes can see Kentucky, how they bounce back from that negative roll, it's a game that I just cross off the beginning of the week, write down my notes, and reevaluate after the week's over and go back and look if you would have been right or would have been wrong with those notes you read.
Are you of that same mindset, Rob Veno here? Kentucky, I didn't see him losing to South Carolina, but can't be looking ahead on your home opener there. Lose that. Now you got Georgia coming in. Is there any way they can bounce back here, do you think, and at least make it interesting?
Well, I think the last couple of years, Joe, the prospects for Kentucky when facing Georgia were even higher than the expectations are here, right? They were undefeated one season, went to play Georgia. Georgia beat them senseless. And then last year, I think they beat them senseless again. It's just a matchup where what Kentucky does really, really well is play defense. Georgia does even better.
Right.
And, you don't even have the running game at Kentucky this year, right? I mean, it's always been a very methodical, deliberate, a field position type offense without a lot of explosion. And if you're going to beat Georgia, you better have some explosives in your arsenal. Maybe they do, and they didn't show them against South Carolina, but let's not fall for that one. I don't know. The matchup just screams of Georgia winning again because with bigger stakes on the line, they've done it a couple of years in a row.
But Vandergriff is terrible, says Hunter Gray in the chat, and you're absolutely correct. He is absolutely awful on so many levels there. But there you got it here, guys. A little extra college football talk for you, and I would encourage you, again, you got any games, if you're watching this on the replay, that you want a breakdown of. Number one, we'll be back again tomorrow. Steve Merrill, Brian Leonard, Teddy Covers. 1:15 Eastern Time, 10:15 Pacific. We'll be back breaking down 5 games for you, and of course, fielding all the questions that you may have about any additional games across the board. We do want to remind you also, now would be the opportunity to hop on board and get a 30-day all-access NFL/college football combo for $199. All you got to do is head over to WagerTalk.com, visit Rob Veno, visit Drew Martin, visit the Pen Ralph Michaels, and partner up with them, guys. Not only college football, but NFL. Get it for the next 30 days for just $199. Every play in both of those sports. That is how you build a bankroll heading into October. and November when it comes to college and the NFL. So take advantage of that while you can. And don't forget, hit that like button there. Instagram, always a pleasure. TikTok, appreciate you guys. Also on X, as well as you lunatics in the YouTube chat rooms, both the shorts and the usual. We appreciate the time as always. Hit us a thumbs up on the way out of here. And don't forget, come back and join us again tomorrow. Plenty more college football still to go through this week. And we've got you covered here at WagerTalk in the College Football Kickoff Show. We'll talk to you again tomorrow, guys. Good luck. We'll see you soon.